The 8-year-old girl's voice cut through the holiday chatter like a knife through silk. I don't want Christmas with you. Every conversation in the upscale toy store stopped dead. Parents froze mid-sentence, children paused their excited chatter, and even the cheerful Christmas music seemed to dim. The man beside her, worn work jacket, calloused hands, eyes that held too much pain for someone barely 40, stood motionless as if her words had physically struck him. What could drive a child to reject Christmas with her own father? And why was the impeccably dressed woman in the corner watching this unfold with tears threatening to spill from her eyes, as though she recognized something in this broken moment that no one else could see? David Mitchell knelt slowly beside his daughter, Emma, his worn jeans touching the polished marble floor of Hartwell's premium toys. The store's crystal chandeliers cast warm light over displays of expensive dolls and remote-controlled cars, but none of that mattered now. His 8-year-old daughter stood rigid, arms crossed, her dark hair falling over eyes that sparkled with unshed tears of anger rather than holiday joy. Emma, sweetheart. David's voice carried the exhaustion of someone who worked double shifts just to afford this moment. We talked about this. We're going to make this Christmas special, just you and me. No! Emma's voice rose higher, drawing more stares from the well-dressed families browsing around them. I don't want to pretend anymore, Dad. I don't want Christmas with you because you're not. She stopped, her small fists clenched at her sides. The silence stretched between them like a chasm. David could feel the weight of judgment from the other parents, their whispered conversations barely concealed behind hands raised to lips. He recognized the look, the assumption that he was somehow failing as a father, that this public outburst reflected his inadequacy. His weathered hands trembled slightly as he reached toward Emma, then stopped mid-air, uncertain. From across the store, Catherine Reynolds observed the scene with an intensity that surprised her. She had come to Hartwell's to pick up a gift for her assistant's daughter, a perfunctory gesture that her personal secretary had suggested would look good for the company's image. But something about this man and his daughter held her frozen in place, her manicured fingers gripping the handle of her designer handbag. Catherine had built her technology empire by reading people, by identifying weakness and strength in boardrooms filled with men who underestimated her. But this scene before her triggered something deeper, something that bypassed her analytical mind and struck directly at places she had long since walled off. The man's gentle patience, despite his obvious embarrassment, the child's raw pain that she was too young to articulate properly, it all felt achingly familiar. Emma's next words shattered the fragile quiet. You're not Mom. You can't make Christmas the way she did, and I don't want your fake Christmas. David's composure cracked. His shoulders sagged as if Emma's words carried physical weight. And for a moment, Catherine saw through his careful facade to the grief that lived just beneath the surface. She watched him run a hand through his brown hair, the gesture of a man trying to hold himself together in public, while his world fell apart. I know I'm not your mum, Emma, David said quietly, his voice thick with emotion he was trying to contain. But I'm here, and I love you, and I'm trying to. Trying isn't enough, Emma shouted, tears now streaming down her cheeks. Nothing you do will bring her back. And I hate Christmas because it just reminds me that she's gone and you're here and it's all wrong. The brutal honesty of a child's pain hung in the air like a physical presence. Several shoppers had stopped pretending to browse and were now openly staring. Catherine could see the judgment in their faces, the whispered speculation about this clearly struggling family. In a store where most customers arrived in luxury cars and left with purchases that cost more than many people made in a month. Catherine had intended to simply leave, to retreat to her penthouse office where other people's family drama couldn't touch her carefully constructed world. But something in David's expression, The way he absorbed his daughter's anger without fighting back, the love that remained evident even in his devastation, made her feet carry her forward instead. "Excuse me." Catherine's voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to commanding rooms full of executives. Both David and Emma turned toward her, startled by the interruption. "I couldn't help but notice you seem to be having a difficult moment." David straightened, wariness replacing vulnerability in his expression. Catherine could read his instant assessment of her. Expensive coat, perfect makeup, the kind of woman who solved problems by throwing money at them. She had seen that look before, usually right before someone asked her for a donation or tried to pitch her an investment opportunity. "We're fine," David said, his voice carefully neutral. "Just a family discussion." Emma wiped her nose with the back of her hand and glared at Catherine with the fearless honesty that only children possess. "Are you going to tell us about how Christmas is magical and we should be grateful and happy?" Catherine found herself genuinely surprised by the question. In her world, people usually told her what they thought she wanted to hear. "Actually, no," she said, crouching down to Emma's eye level despite the damage it would do to her silk dress. "Christmas can be really hard when someone important is missing." Something in Catherine's tone made both David and Emma pause. The practiced corporate polish was gone, replaced by something raw and more real. "How would you know?" Emma challenged, but her anger had shifted to curiosity. Catherine was quiet for a moment, aware that her next words would either build a bridge or create an irreparable divide. "Because I've spent a lot of Christmases missing someone too. Someone I never got to meet, but who I think about every year when the holidays come around." David studied Catherine with new attention. The polished exterior remained, but something in her eyes suggested depths of experience that money couldn't buy. "I'm sorry for your loss," he said quietly, and Catherine could hear that he meant it. "Thank you." Catherine stood slowly, brushing invisible dust from her dress. "I'm Catherine, by the way. Catherine Reynolds." "David Mitchell. This is Emma." David's voice carried wariness, but also a tentative politeness. Emma had gone quiet, her earlier rage replaced by the intense focus children brought to anything that genuinely interested them. "What's your person's name? The one you miss?" The question hit Catherine like a physical blow. She had spent years perfecting the art of deflection, of steering conversations away from personal territory. But something about this child's directness demanded honesty. They didn't have a name yet. They were just a hope, really. A possibility that ended before it could become real." David's expression softened with understanding. He knew the weight of loss, the way it could shape years of decisions and fears. "How long ago?" 7 years, Catherine said, surprised by her own honesty. 7 years this Christmas Eve, actually." The admission hung between them, creating an unexpected moment of connection. Around them, the store continued its busy holiday rhythm, but their small circle had become separate from that energy, insulated by shared understanding of grief. Emma moved closer to Catherine, studying her with the intensity of someone making an important decision. "Do you cry about it?" "Emma," David warned gently, but Catherine held up a hand. "Sometimes," Catherine admitted, "especially at Christmas. There's something about all the family celebrations that makes the absence feel bigger, isn't there?" Emma nodded solemnly. "Dad doesn't cry, but I can tell he wants to, especially when he looks at Mom's pictures." David's jaw tightened at his daughter's observation, but he didn't contradict her. Catherine could see the effort it took for him to maintain composure, to be strong for his daughter, even when his own grief threatened to overwhelm him. "Your mom must have been very special," Catherine said gently. "She was the best mom ever," Emma said fiercely. "She made Christmas cookies shaped like snowflakes, And she would read me stories about Christmas mice, and she always knew exactly what present would make me the happiest. Dad tries, but he—" She trailed off, looking guilty. "But he's not her," Catherine finished. "And trying to fill someone else's place is impossible, isn't it?" Both David and Emma stared at Catherine, surprised by her understanding. For a moment, the barriers between stranger and family seemed to dissolve. "I think," Catherine said carefully, "that maybe Christmas doesn't have to be about replacing what you lost. Maybe it can be about honoring it while still making new memories." Emma considered this with the seriousness children brought to concepts that adults often dismissed. "But how do you honor someone who isn't there?" Catherine glanced at David, seeking permission to continue this conversation that was veering into territory she hadn't intended to explore. Something in his expression told her to proceed. "Well, you could tell stories about her. You could make something she loved, even if it doesn't turn out exactly the same way. You could do something kind for someone else, the way she would have done for you." "Like what?" Emma's anger had completely transformed into engaged curiosity. Catherine looked around the store, her mind racing. She had built her career on finding solutions to impossible problems, but this felt different, more personal, more important somehow. "What did your mom like to do, besides make cookies and read stories?" Emma's face lit up with memory. "She liked to help people. Dad says she was always bringing food to neighbors who were sick, or helping old people carry their groceries. She said kindness was like magic because it made both people feel better." David's eyes misted at his daughter's words. "She did say that. Your mom believed that kindness was the most important thing in the world." Catherine felt something shift in her chest, a loosening of tension she hadn't realized she was carrying. "Then maybe that's how you honor her memory. Maybe Christmas with your dad could be about carrying on that magic she taught you about." Emma looked between Catherine and David, her 8-year-old mind working to process this new perspective. "But Dad works all the time. He doesn't have time for magic." The words stung David visibly. Catherine could see the guilt in his expression, the weight of impossible choices between providing for his daughter and being present for her. "How many hours do you work?" Catherine asked David directly, her CEO instincts kicking in. David shifted uncomfortably. "2 jobs. Days at an electronics repair shop, nights doing janitorial work at office buildings. It's temporary, just until—" "Just until what?" "Until I can afford to work less," David said simply. "Emma needs stability. She needs to know we won't lose our apartment, that there will be food on the table. The magic stuff, that has to come second to survival." Catherine studied David with new respect. She had built her fortune by making hard choices, by prioritizing long-term success over short-term comfort. But David's choices were about love, about sacrifice for someone else's welfare. It was a kind of strength she had never had to develop. "What if it didn't have to be either or?" Catherine heard herself saying. "What if there was a way to have both stability and magic?" David's expression hardened with suspicion. "Look, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but we don't need charity. We'll figure it out on our own." Emma tugged on David's sleeve. "Dad, maybe she just wants to help, like Mom used to help people." The comparison stopped David cold. Catherine could see him struggling between pride and pragmatism, between the need to maintain independence and the exhaustion of carrying everything alone. "I'm not talking about charity," Catherine said carefully. "I'm talking about possibility, about finding solutions that work for everyone involved." "What kind of solutions?" David's voice carried skepticism, but also a thread of hope he was trying to suppress. Catherine looked around the store again, her mind working through possibilities. She had made her fortune by seeing opportunities that others missed, by connecting resources with needs in ways that created value for everyone involved. But this felt different than any business problem she had ever tackled. "What's your background, besides repair work and janitorial?" "Electronics engineering originally. I had my own repair business before." David gestured vaguely, encompassing loss and financial pressure and the collapse of dreams under the weight of necessity. "Before everything changed," Catherine finished. "What happened to the business?" David glanced at Emma, clearly reluctant to discuss adult problems in front of his daughter. But Emma was listening with the intensity of someone whose life was shaped by decisions made in conversations just like this one. "Medical bills," David said simply. "Insurance didn't cover everything. Treatment was expensive. And afterward, keeping the business running while taking care of Emma and grieving Sarah was impossible. I sold everything to pay off debt and start over." Catherine felt pieces clicking together in her mind, the same pattern recognition that had made her successful in business. But this wasn't about profit margins or market share. This was about human lives, about potential being wasted because resources weren't aligned properly. "My company has been looking for someone to head up our customer service technical support division," Catherine said slowly. "Someone with both technical knowledge and the patience to help people solve problems. It's day shift, Monday through Friday, with benefits that include health insurance and—" She paused, studying David's expression. "And enough salary that you wouldn't need a second job." David stared at her, suspicion and hope warring in his expression. "Why would you offer that to someone you just met?" The question hung in the air between them. Catherine could feel Emma watching her intently, waiting for an answer that would determine whether this moment became something meaningful or just another empty gesture from someone with more money than sense. Why was she making this offer? Catherine had built her career on careful analysis, on measured risks and calculated decisions. But standing in this toy store, watching a man sacrifice his own well-being for his daughter's security, while that same daughter grieved for the life they had lost, Catherine felt something she hadn't experienced in years. She felt useful in a way that had nothing to do with profit margins or stock prices. "Because talent is being wasted," Catherine said finally. "Because problems aren't being solved efficiently. Because sometimes the right person for a job is standing right in front of you, and the only question is whether you're smart enough to recognize it." "And what would you get out of it?" David asked, still skeptical. Catherine considered the question seriously. What would she get? A good employee, potentially. But that wasn't what was driving her offer, and they all knew it. "Peace of mind," Catherine said eventually. "The knowledge that I helped solve a problem instead of just walking away from it." Emma had been listening to this entire exchange with growing excitement. "Dad, this is like what Mom used to say about opportunities. Remember? She said sometimes angels don't have wings, they just have good ideas." David's resistance crumbled at his daughter's words. Catherine could see the exact moment when hope overcame pride, when desperation masqueraded as possibility became too tempting to refuse. "I would need to know more about the position," David said carefully. "Salary, responsibilities, whether there's room for advancement." "Of course." Catherine reached into her purse and pulled out a business card, then paused and reached for a pen instead. She wrote something on the back of the card before handing it to David. "That's my direct line. Call me tomorrow after 10, and we'll discuss details." David took the card with hands that trembled slightly. Emma bounced on her toes, energy that had been trapped in anger now transforming into excitement. "Does this mean we can have Christmas after all?" Emma asked, looking between her father and Catherine with an expression of cautious hope. "We were always going to have Christmas, sweetheart," David said gently. "Maybe now it can be the kind of Christmas Mom would have wanted for us." Emma threw her arms around David's waist, her earlier anger completely forgotten. "I'm sorry I said I didn't want Christmas with you, Dad. I do want it. I just want it to not hurt so much." David's arms encircled his daughter, and Catherine saw tears he couldn't hide any longer slip down his cheeks. "I know, baby, I know. I want that too." Catherine watched this moment of reconciliation with an unexpected tightness in her chest. She had orchestrated $1,000 business deals and multi-million-dollar acquisitions, but this felt different, more important, more real. "Mrs. Catherine," Emma's voice interrupted her thoughts. "Just Catherine is fine, sweetheart. Are you going to have Christmas? I mean, do you have somewhere to go?" The question caught Catherine off guard. She had planned to spend Christmas Eve reviewing quarterly reports and Christmas Day at the country club, a perfectly civilized and completely empty celebration that would keep her safely distanced from the kind of family intimacy that reminded her of everything she didn't have. "I have plans," Catherine said carefully, which wasn't exactly a lie. Emma studied her with the penetrating gaze that only children possessed. "But do you have people? For Christmas, I mean." "Emma," David warned gently, but his daughter was already moving forward with the fearless generosity of childhood. "You should come have Christmas with us," Emma announced, as if it were the most obvious solution in the world. "Dad makes really good pancakes, and we have hot chocolate, and we could tell you stories about Mom. She would have liked you, I think." Catherine felt her carefully constructed emotional barriers cracking. This child, who had been furious about Christmas just minutes earlier, was now inviting a stranger to share their most intimate family celebration. The offer came from a place of pure generosity, untainted by the complex calculations that governed most adult interactions. "That's very kind of you, Emma, but I'm sure your dad would like Christmas to just be family," Catherine said, giving David an easy way to retract his daughter's impulsive invitation. But David was looking at Catherine with something that might have been understanding. "Actually," he said slowly, "Mom always said Christmas was better with more people around the table. She used to invite anyone who didn't have somewhere else to go." Emma said triumphantly, "Mom would definitely want you to come. And besides, you helped us figure out how to have Christmas again. That makes you practically family already." Catherine felt something break open inside her chest, something that had been sealed away for so long she had forgotten it existed. The invitation wasn't about charity or obligation. It was about inclusion, about the recognition that everyone deserved to belong somewhere, especially during the holidays. Catherine stopped, overwhelmed by emotions she didn't have names for. "I would be honored to share Christmas with your family." Emma clapped her hands together, practically vibrating with excitement. "This is going to be the best Christmas ever! Wait until you see our tree. Dad cut it himself from a lot, and it's a little crooked, but that makes it special. And we have ornaments that Mom made when she was little, and Dad's going to teach me how to make her special cookies, and now you can help." David smiled at his daughter's enthusiasm, but Catherine could see the anxiety underlying his happiness. Taking a job from someone he'd just met was risky enough. Inviting her into their home for Christmas felt enormous, loaded with potential for disappointment or awkwardness. "Are you sure about this?" Catherine asked David quietly while Emma examined a display of toy trains. "I don't want to intrude on your family traditions." David considered the question seriously. Emma's right about her mom. Sarah had a gift for bringing people together, for making everyone feel like they belonged. I think maybe sharing Christmas with someone else who understands what it's like to miss someone might be exactly what we both need." Catherine nodded, not trusting herself to speak around the emotion clogging her throat. She had spent years building walls around her personal life, protecting herself from the kind of vulnerability that came with letting people matter. But something about this man and his daughter had slipped past her defenses before she even realized it was happening. "What time should I come?" Catherine asked. "Christmas Eve or Christmas Day?" David asked. "We usually do presents Christmas morning, but Christmas Eve is when we—" He trailed off, looking uncertain. When we talk to Mom, Emma supplied matter-of-factly, rejoining their conversation. Dad says she's watching over us, so on Christmas Eve we tell her about our year and about the good things that happened, and the hard things too. It's not sad, she added quickly, seeing Catherine's expression. It's like she's still part of Christmas, just in a different way. Catherine felt tears threatening for the second time that evening. The simple beauty of this ritual, the way this family had found to include their missing member in their celebration, touched something deep inside her. I think, Catherine said carefully, that sounds like exactly the right way to remember someone important. Emma beamed at her approval. So you'll come Christmas Eve? We eat dinner, and then we talk to Mom, and then we watch a movie and drink hot chocolate with marshmallows. If your dad agrees, I would love to come Christmas Eve. David nodded, though Catherine could see the nervousness in his expression. 6 o'clock? I should warn you, our apartment isn't fancy. It's small, and the furniture is mostly second-hand, and— David, Catherine interrupted gently. I've eaten Christmas dinner alone in a penthouse overlooking the city for the past 7 years. Trust me when I say that small and second-hand sounds perfect. The relief in David's expression was unmistakable. Catherine realized that her wealth had been a barrier between them, a source of anxiety about whether she would judge their modest circumstances. But somehow, in this moment, none of that seemed to matter. Emma tugged on Catherine's sleeve. Before Christmas Eve, though, we need to buy a present. For Mom. We always buy her a present and put it under the tree. Catherine looked puzzled. But if she's not here to open it? Emma finished. We know, but Dad says love doesn't stop just because someone goes away. So we pick out something we think she would have loved, and we put it under the tree, and it reminds us that she's still part of our family. The explanation hit Catherine like a physical blow, the sheer generosity of spirit required to continue buying gifts for someone who would never open them, the way this family had refused to let death steal their love or their traditions, humbled her completely. What kind of present do you usually choose? Catherine asked. Something beautiful, Emma said seriously. Mom loved beautiful things, not expensive things, but things that were pretty or soft or smelled good. Last year we bought her a scarf that felt like clouds. The year before, it was a journal with pressed flowers on the cover. David was watching Catherine's reaction carefully, as if gauging whether this tradition would seem strange or inappropriate to someone from outside their family. But Catherine was remembering her own rituals of grief, the ways she had tried to honor the child she had lost, and finding them pale and empty compared to this vibrant celebration of continuing love. Would it be— Catherine stopped, uncertain. Would it be appropriate for me to help choose this year's gift? I mean, I know I didn't know your mom, but— Yes! Emma's response was immediate and enthusiastic. Mom would love that. She always said the best presents came from people who really thought about what would make someone happy. Catherine felt something loosening in her chest, a warmth that had been absent for so long she had forgotten what it felt like. Then let's find something beautiful for your mom. The three of them moved through the store together, and Catherine found herself seeing it through entirely new eyes. Instead of expensive displays designed to separate wealthy parents from their money, she saw possibilities for joy, for connection, for the kind of thoughtful giving that Emma had described. Emma gravitated toward a display of music boxes, her eyes wide with wonder as she wound them up and listened to their delicate melodies. Mom loved music, she explained to Catherine. She used to sing to me every night before bed. Catherine watched Emma's face as she listened to each music box, saw the careful consideration the 8-year-old brought to choosing something perfect for her absent mother. There was no sadness in Emma's expression, only love and the desire to honor someone important. This one, Emma said finally, pointing to a music box carved with intricate flowers. When wound, it played Somewhere Over the Rainbow in crystalline notes that seemed to float in the air around them. She used to sing me that song when I was scared. Emma explained. She said it reminded her that beautiful things were always possible, even when everything seemed dark. David's eyes filled with tears at his daughter's choice. Catherine could see him remembering his wife singing that song, could feel the weight of memory and love and loss that surrounded this simple purchase. "It's perfect," Catherine said, and meant it. They made their way to the register, this unlikely trio bound together by shared understanding of grief and the possibility of healing. As David pulled out his wallet, Catherine noticed him counting the bills, saw the calculation in his expression as he weighed the cost of this gift against their other needs. Without thinking, Catherine placed her hand over David's. "Please, let me buy this one. It would mean a great deal to me to contribute to your tradition." David started to protest, but Emma's hand slipped into Catherine's free one, and something in the child's touch made arguments about pride and independence seem less important than the connection being offered. "Thank you," David said simply, and Catherine heard in those two words an acceptance that went beyond the music box, an opening to the possibility of belonging that she hadn't dared hope for. As they left the store together, Emma skipping between them with the music box carefully cradled in her arms, Catherine felt as though she were walking into an entirely new life. The evening air was crisp with the promise of snow, and Christmas lights twinkled from storefronts and street lamps, transforming the familiar city into something magical. "Mrs. Catherine," Emma said, then corrected herself with a grin. "Catherine, do you think my mom can see us right now?" Catherine looked down at this remarkable child who had somehow managed to transform anger into joy, despair into hope, and strangers into family in the space of one evening. "I think," Catherine said carefully, "that if love is real, then the people we love are never really gone. They live on in the kindness we show each other and in the way we choose to honor their memory." Emma nodded solemnly, satisfied with this answer. "Then she can see us, and I think she's happy that we found each other." As they reached the corner where their paths would diverge, David and Emma toward home, Catherine toward her empty penthouse, none of them wanted to say goodbye. The connection forged in that toy store felt too precious to break, too fragile to survive separation. "I'll call you tomorrow about the job," David said, but his words felt inadequate for everything that had passed between them. "And we'll see you Christmas Eve," Emma added, bouncing on her toes with excitement. Catherine nodded, not trusting her voice. She watched them walk away, David's hand on Emma's shoulder, the music box secure in the child's careful grip. For the first time in years, she had somewhere to be on Christmas Eve. For the first time in years, she would not spend the holiday alone. As she turned toward home, Catherine realized that everything had changed. The carefully ordered life she had built, successful, controlled, protected from the messiness of human connection, no longer felt like enough. Her 8-year-old's invitation to Christmas dinner had cracked something open inside her, something that had been sealed away since that terrible Christmas 7 years ago when she had lost not just a pregnancy, but all hope of ever having a family. Maybe, Catherine thought, as she walked through the city streets, decorated for a holiday she had stopped truly celebrating years ago, maybe family wasn't just about blood relations or traditional structures. Maybe it was about showing up for each other, about choosing to care even when caring meant risking heartbreak. Maybe it was about finding the courage to say yes when someone offered you a place at their table, a role in their story, a chance to belong to something larger than your own protected solitude. The city sparkled around her with Christmas lights and possibility, and for the first time in 7 years, Catherine Reynolds was looking forward to Christmas Eve. 3 days later, Catherine found herself standing outside a modest apartment building in Queens, holding a bottle of wine and a wrapped present, her heart beating with an unfamiliar mixture of nervousness and anticipation. She had spent the morning in her office, finalizing David's employment contract, and setting up his start date for the Monday after New Year's. But the professional transaction felt secondary to the personal invitation that had brought her here. The phone call with David had gone smoothly. The salary she offered was more than fair, the benefits comprehensive, and his qualifications were genuinely impressive once she looked past the circumstances that had derailed his career. But as she climbed the narrow stairs to apartment 3B, Catherine realized that this evening would determine whether their connection could survive the transition from desperate strangers to something resembling friends. David opened the door before she could knock, as if he had been watching for her arrival. He wore khakis and a button-down shirt that looked freshly pressed, and Catherine could smell something delicious cooking in the background. "Catherine, welcome," David said, his nervousness evident in the way he gestured her inside. "I hope you didn't have trouble finding the place." "Not at all," Catherine replied, taking in the small living room with its second-hand furniture and carefully arranged decorations. The apartment was exactly as David had described, modest and simple, but it radiated warmth in a way her expensive penthouse never had. Christmas lights were strung around the windows, and a slightly crooked tree stood in the corner, decorated with an eclectic mix of ornaments that clearly carried years of memories. "Catherine!" Emma's voice rang out from the kitchen, followed immediately by the girl herself, wearing a red dress with a small apron tied around her waist. "You came. Dad said you might change your mind because important people are always too busy for regular people." "Emma," David warned, embarrassed by his daughter's blunt honesty. But Catherine laughed, the first genuine laugh she could remember having in months. "Well, I'm here, aren't I? And I brought presents?" Emma's eyes widened as she noticed the wrapped packages in Catherine's hands. "Really? For us? One for you, one for your dad, and—" Catherine paused, pulling out a third package wrapped in silver paper. "One for your mom." The apartment went completely quiet. David stared at the silver package, his expression shifting through surprise, emotion, and something that might have been gratitude. Emma's mouth formed a perfect circle of amazement. "You bought Mom a present?" Emma whispered. "But you never even met her." Catherine knelt down to Emma's level, suddenly unsure whether she had overstepped some invisible boundary. "I hope that's okay. I know I didn't know her, but after hearing you talk about her, I felt like I wanted to honor her memory too." Emma threw her arms around Catherine's neck with such force that she nearly knocked them both over. "It's perfect," the little girl said fiercely. "Mom would love that someone who didn't even know her still wanted to give her a present. That's exactly the kind of magic she believed in." David cleared his throat roughly, and when Catherine looked up at him, she saw tears in his eyes that he was trying hard to control. "That was very thoughtful," he said quietly. "Sarah would have been touched." The use of his wife's name felt like a gift, a sign that Catherine was being trusted with something precious. She stood slowly, Emma still clinging to her hand. "Something smells incredible," Catherine said, changing the subject to give David a moment to compose himself. "Dad's making Mom's famous pot roast," Emma announced proudly. "He practiced it 3 times this week to make sure it would be perfect for you." "Emma!" David protested, but he was smiling. "It's true, and I helped make the cookies. We made snowflakes just like Mom used to, and only 2 of them got burnt." Catherine felt that unfamiliar warmth spreading through her chest again. When was the last time anyone had gone to such trouble for her? Her business associates took her to expensive restaurants, where the service was impeccable and the conversation was careful. Her few remaining friends from college exchanged perfectly chosen gifts and maintained relationships that felt more like networking than genuine connection. But this family had spent days preparing for her visit, practicing recipes and burning cookies, and creating an evening designed specifically to welcome her into their world. "Can I see the tree?" Catherine asked, and Emma immediately dragged her toward the corner where the slightly lopsided evergreen stood proudly. "This ornament is from when I was 3, Emma explained, pointing to a construction paper angel with a crayon-colored face. And this one Mom made when she was little, just like me. Dad says I look exactly like she did when she was 8. Catherine studied the faded photograph tucked among the ornaments, showing a young woman with Emma's dark hair and bright eyes. She was beautiful. You do look just like her. And this is my favorite, Emma continued, pointing to a simple wooden star painted gold. Mom made it the last Christmas before she got sick. She said it was supposed to remind us that even in the darkest times, there's always light if you know where to look. The ornament was clearly handmade, slightly uneven and painted with obvious care rather than professional skill. But it hung in the place of honor at the top of the tree, and Catherine could see why it was Emma's favorite. It represented hope in the face of loss, beauty created by loving hands, the kind of legacy that money couldn't buy. "It's perfect," Catherine said softly. "And look," Emma said, pointing to the base of the tree where several wrapped presents waited. "There's the one we bought for Mom, and now yours too. She has the most presents of anyone." Catherine felt her throat tighten at the sight of those gifts for someone who would never open them, at the way this family had found to include their missing member in their celebration. It was heartbreaking and beautiful, and completely foreign to her own experience of loss. "Dinner's ready," David called from the kitchen, and they made their way to a small dining table set with mismatched dishes and cloth napkins that had clearly been ironed for the occasion. The pot roast was indeed perfect, tender and flavorful in a way that spoke of hours of careful preparation. The conversation flowed easily, with Emma chattering about school and friends, while David asked Catherine thoughtful questions about her work that showed genuine interest rather than networking calculation. "Do you have any brothers or sisters?" Emma asked during a lull in the conversation. "No, it's just me," Catherine replied. "I was an only child." "That's sad," Emma said, with the blunt honesty of childhood. "Don't you get lonely?" The question hit Catherine unexpectedly hard. She had spent years convincing herself that independence was strength, that needing others was weakness. But sitting at this table, surrounded by the warmth of family connection, she realized how fundamentally lonely her life had become. "Sometimes," Catherine admitted. "Yes, sometimes I do get lonely." "Well, now you have us," Emma announced matter-of-factly. "Dad says people who eat dinner together are family, even if they're not related. So now you're part of our family." David looked mortified. "Emma, you can't just adopt people into the family without asking." "Why not?" Emma challenged. "Mum always said family wasn't just about who you're born to, it's about who shows up for you when you need them. Catherine showed up for us at the store, and now she's showing up for Christmas. That makes her family." Catherine felt tears threatening again at the child's simple logic. Family was about showing up. She had built her entire adult life around not showing up, around maintaining distance and control and independence. But here was an 8-year-old offering her something she hadn't even realized she was desperate for. "I would be honored to be part of your family," Catherine said quietly. After dinner, they moved to the living room, where David built a fire in the small fireplace, while Emma arranged cushions on the floor. This was clearly a practiced ritual, one that held deep meaning for both father and daughter. "This is when we talk to Mom," Emma explained to Catherine. "We tell her about the year and about the good things and the hard things. Do you want to go first, or should I?" Catherine felt panic flutter in her chest. She had never been part of anything like this, had never spoken to the dead or shared grief in such an open way. But Emma was looking at her expectantly, and David's expression was gentle and encouraging. "Maybe you should go first," Catherine said. "Show me how it's done." Emma nodded seriously and settled cross-legged on a cushion, facing the tree where her mother's presents waited. "Hi, Mom," she began conversationally, as if her mother were sitting right there with them. "I know you're watching, so you probably already know about Catherine, but I wanted to tell you anyway because she's really nice and I think you would like her a lot." Catherine watched in amazement as Emma chatted easily with her absent mother, updating her on school events and friend drama and her excitement about her father's new job. There was nothing morbid or forced about the conversation. It felt natural, healthy, like a continuation of a relationship rather than an ending. "And Dad has been really sad sometimes," Emma continued, glancing at David with the perceptive honesty of children. "I know he tries to hide it, but I can tell. I think he misses you even more than I do sometimes, because you were his best friend, and now he doesn't have anyone to talk to about grown-up things." David's composure cracked slightly at his daughter's observation. Catherine could see the truth in Emma's words, could recognize the isolation that came from being the only adult in a family, the weight of carrying everything alone. "But I think maybe that's changing now," Emma added, looking at Catherine with a smile. "Because Catherine understands about missing people, and maybe she can be Dad's friend so he's not so lonely anymore." The suggestion hung in the air between them, loaded with possibility and hope. Catherine found herself looking at David, really looking at him for the first time since they had met. She saw the strength that came from putting someone else's needs first, the gentleness that survived despite tremendous loss, the kind of integrity that couldn't be bought or learned, but only lived. "Your turn, Dad," Emma prompted. David took a deep breath, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. "Hi, sweetheart," he said softly, and Catherine could hear years of love and longing in those two words. "I miss you so much, especially at Christmas. I know you're watching over Emma, and I hope you're proud of the amazing little girl she's becoming. She's just like you, kind and generous and brave enough to invite strangers to dinner." He paused, struggling with emotion. "I found a job, Sarah. A good one, with benefits and regular hours. I'll finally be able to give Emma the stability she deserves, the life you wanted for her. And maybe I can start to heal too. I know that's what you'd want for me." Catherine felt like she was intruding on something sacred, but she also felt honored to witness this moment of raw honesty and continuing love. This was what grief looked like when it was healthy, when it honored the past while still making space for the future. "Catherine," Emma's voice was gentle. "Do you want to say something to Mom? Or if you want to talk to your baby, that's okay too." The suggestion stunned Catherine. She had never spoken aloud to the child she had lost, had never allowed herself to imagine what that conversation might contain. But surrounded by the safety of this family's acceptance, she found words coming. "I don't know how to do this," Catherine said hesitantly. "I've never talked to someone who's gone before." "Just say what's in your heart," David suggested quietly. That's what Sarah would have wanted. Catherine closed her eyes, searching for words she had never allowed herself to think. "I don't know if you can hear me," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I wanted you to know that I never forgot you, even though we never met. I've thought about you every day for 7 years, wondered who you would have become, what your life would have looked like." Tears were flowing freely now, years of suppressed grief finally finding expression. "I'm sorry I wasn't brave enough to try again after losing you. I'm sorry I built walls instead of building connections. But tonight, meeting David and Emma, I feel like maybe it's not too late to have a family, even if it doesn't look the way I always imagined it would." The fire crackled in the silence that followed, and Catherine felt something shift inside her chest, a loosening of guilt and regret that she had carried for so long it had become part of her identity. Emma moved closer to Catherine, slipping her small hand into Catherine's larger one. "I think your baby is happy that you found us," she said simply. "And I think my mum is too. She always said everything happens for a reason, even the sad things." They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the fire and the twinkling lights on the tree. Outside, snow began to fall, dusting the windows with white and making the small apartment feel even more like a refuge from the world. "Present time?" Emma asked hopefully, and the somber mood shifted into anticipation. They exchanged gifts with the ritual slowness of people savoring each moment. Emma gave Catherine a hand-drawn picture of the three of them standing in front of the Christmas tree, their faces beaming with exaggerated smiles. David's gift was more practical, a beautiful leather-bound journal with Catherine's initials embossed on the cover. "For recording memories?" he explained. "Emma thought you might want to start writing down the good things that happen, so you don't forget them." Catherine's gifts were met with equal enthusiasm. For Emma, she had chosen a jewelry box that played the same tune as the music box they had bought for Sarah, "Somewhere Over the Rainbow." For David, a high-quality tablet computer that would help him with his new job and allow him to take online courses to advance his career. But the most meaningful moment came when they placed their gifts for Sarah under the tree. Catherine had chosen a silk scarf in deep blue, the color of hope and possibility. Emma arranged it carefully next to the music box, creating a small shrine of continuing love. "She would have loved the scarf," David said quietly. Blue was her favorite color. As the evening wound down and Emma began to yawn despite her best efforts to stay awake, Catherine realized she didn't want to leave. This small apartment had become a sanctuary. These people had become something precious and irreplaceable. The thought of returning to her empty penthouse felt unbearable. "I should probably go," Catherine said reluctantly. "It's getting late, and Emma needs her sleep before Santa comes." "Do you have to?" Emma asked, plaintively. "Can't you stay and see Christmas morning with us?" Catherine looked at David, unsure whether the invitation was genuine or just his daughter's wishful thinking. But she saw welcome in his expression, saw the same reluctance to end this magical evening that she was feeling. "If you don't mind a guest for breakfast?" Catherine said carefully. "I would love to stay." Emma cheered and hugged Catherine fiercely before being shepherded off to bed by her father. Catherine helped clean up the dinner dishes, moving around the small kitchen with an ease that surprised her. She had grown up with household staff and had lived as an adult with cleaning services. But there was something deeply satisfying about washing dishes alongside David, about performing these simple domestic tasks as part of a family unit. "Thank you," David said as they finished the last of the cleanup. "For everything. The job, the gifts, but mostly for just being here. This is the first Christmas since Sarah died that didn't feel like we were just surviving it." Catherine dried her hands on the dish towel, considering his words. "Thank you for including me. I didn't realize how much I needed this until I had it." They stood in the small kitchen, the weight of everything unsaid hanging between them. Catherine could feel something shifting, some fundamental change in how she saw her life and her future. The careful isolation she had maintained for years suddenly seemed not just unnecessary, but actively harmful. "David," she began, then stopped, unsure how to voice what she was feeling. "I know," he said gently. "I feel it too. This connection, this sense that we were meant to find each other. It's scary and wonderful and completely unexpected. I don't know how to do this," Catherine admitted. "I've spent so many years protecting myself, keeping people at arm's length. The idea of caring about someone again, of risking that kind of loss, it terrifies me." David moved closer, his expression gentle and understanding. "We don't have to figure it all out tonight. We can take it slow, see where this leads us. The important thing is that we found each other, that we're both brave enough to try." Catherine nodded, feeling some of her anxiety ease. David was right. They didn't need to have all the answers immediately. They just needed to be open to possibility, to the chance that their broken pieces might fit together in a way that made them both whole. "Merry Christmas, Catherine," David said softly. "Merry Christmas, David." Christmas morning dawned bright and clear, with fresh snow blanketing the city in pristine white. Catherine woke on the couch to the sound of Emma's excited whispers and the smell of coffee brewing in the kitchen. For a moment, she was disoriented by the unfamiliarity of waking up somewhere other than her own bed. But then memory flooded back, bringing with it a warmth that had nothing to do with the blanket David must have covered her with sometime during the night. "She's awake," Emma announced as Catherine sat up and stretched. "Can we do presents now, Dad, please?" "After breakfast," David replied from the kitchen, but his tone was indulgent. "Catherine needs coffee before she can handle your energy level." The next few hours passed in a blur of torn wrapping paper, delighted squeals, and the kind of chaotic joy that only Christmas morning with a child can bring. Emma loved everything she received, but her favorite gift was clearly having Catherine there to share the experience. She insisted that Catherine help her with every present, narrating each discovery as if documenting the moment for posterity. As the gift-opening frenzy wound down, Emma suddenly grew quiet, staring at the two remaining presents under the tree, the ones for her mother. "Should we open them?" she asked uncertainly. "I mean, I know Mom can't really open them, but maybe we could see what we chose for her." David looked at Catherine, seeking guidance for a situation they had never encountered before. But Catherine found herself nodding, understanding instinctively what Emma was really asking for. "I think," Catherine said gently, "that your mom would want to see that her gifts were appreciated, even if she can't open them herself." They opened the music box first, winding it carefully and listening to the familiar melody that filled the room with bittersweet beauty. Then came Catherine's scarf, which Emma immediately wrapped around her own shoulders. "It's like having a hug from both of you," Emma announced, and Catherine felt her heart clench with emotion. The rest of Christmas Day passed in comfortable domesticity. They watched holiday movies, played board games, and worked together to prepare Christmas dinner. Catherine found herself helping with tasks she had never performed before: mashing potatoes, setting the table, making gravy from scratch, and discovering unexpected satisfaction in these simple acts of care. As evening approached and reality began to intrude on their perfect bubble, Catherine felt anxiety creeping back in. Tomorrow would bring normal life, work responsibilities, separate homes, the need to figure out what their relationship would look like outside of this magical holiday suspension of regular rules. "What are you thinking about?" David asked quietly as Emma dozed in front of the television, exhausted from her day of excitement. "Tomorrow," Catherine admitted. "How to make this real, how to integrate this connection into actual life instead of just holiday magic." David was quiet for a moment, considering her words. "What if we started simple? Dinner once a week, maybe Saturday evenings. Emma could show you more of her mom's recipes, and we could get to know each other without the pressure of defining everything immediately." The suggestion felt perfect, regular enough to build on their connection, but not so overwhelming as to trigger Catherine's flight instincts. "I would like that very much. And maybe," David continued hesitantly, "maybe sometimes you could help Emma with homework or come to her school events? If you want to, I mean. She's been asking about whether you might want to be like a mom figure in her life." The words hit Catherine like a physical blow, not because they were unwelcome, but because they offered something she had never dared dream possible. The chance to be part of a child's life, to contribute to someone's growth and happiness, to matter in the most fundamental way possible. "I would be honored," Catherine whispered. "I can't replace her mother, but if she wants me to be part of her life, part of both of your lives, yes, absolutely yes." As if summoned by their conversation, Emma stirred and opened her eyes, immediately focusing on the two adults with the intense awareness that children brought to important moments. "Are you going to be our family now?" she asked Catherine directly. "Like, really our family, not just Christmas family?" Catherine looked at David, seeing her own hopes and fears reflected in his expression. This was the moment of choice, the point where they either committed to building something together or retreated to the safety of their separate lives. "Yes," Catherine said, the word carrying the weight of a promise. "If you'll have me, I would love to be part of your family." Emma launched herself off the couch and into Catherine's arms with such force that she nearly knocked them both over. "This is the best Christmas present ever," she declared. "Mum would be so happy that we found you." As Catherine held this remarkable child, who had somehow seen past all her defenses to the woman underneath, she felt the final walls around her heart crumble completely. For years she had believed that success meant independence, that strength meant needing no one, but Emma's fierce hug and David's gentle smile taught her that the opposite was true. Real strength came from vulnerability, from the courage to love despite the risk of loss. Real success was measured not in profit margins or stock prices, but in moments like this one, surrounded by people who chose to love you not for what you could provide, but for who you were willing to become. Outside, snow continued to fall on Christmas night, blanketing the city in pristine possibility. Inside the small apartment in Queens, a family that had begun as strangers shared their first evening together, building the foundation of something beautiful and lasting and true. Catherine Reynolds, CEO and woman of the world, had finally found her way home, and it looked nothing like she had ever imagined it would, which was exactly perfect. As Emma drifted back to sleep between them on the couch, David reached over and took Catherine's hand. No words were necessary. They had found each other in the most unexpected way, brought together by a child's pain and a woman's loneliness and a man's quiet strength. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, the work of building a relationship from hope and possibility. But tonight, Christmas night, they were exactly where they belonged. Together, complete, and finally home.